Now that we have defined the critical issues surrounding our climate crisis, let's understand nature's role through climate change. While he can't be here with us in person today, he sends a recorded message for all of us. And so let's welcome the founder and CEO of GIST Advisory, UN Goodwill Fellow, and the 2018 to 2021 President of World Wildlife Fund International, Mr. Pavan Sukhdev.
This is Pavan Sukhdev. I'm afraid I'm not with you in person today, but I hope that we can cover some really important and interesting topics that are affecting the corporate world, affecting the investor world, and indeed engaging regulators more and more these days. It's about corporate sustainability as a pathway towards enduring profitability. Today, the context in which we are trying to navigate a very complex space of risks is actually both environmental as well as social. And on the environmental side, the worries are exceedingly high because we are moving at a relentless pace towards all of the planetary boundaries, some more, some less, but certainly the boundaries on biodiversity in terms of extinctions per million species per year, you can see have broken out of the safe operating space. The safe operating space is essentially the area, the torus that you see, which is between the green zone of safety and the orange zone of risk. Now, what this means is that not only are we risking biodiversity and of course climate change, but also pollution from phosphorus and nitrogen, usage of fresh water, changes in land use change, deforestation and damming and destruction of wetlands and so on. And all of these have an effect on the natural environment, which enables us to have healthy and resilient economies. This is compounded by the risks of inequalities, and the one that I have shown on the right-hand side in this, sadly, champagne glass kind of shape is basically income inequality, but there are many other kinds of inequities and inequalities. And both are actually exacerbated by each other. Within the environmental space, when we hit boundaries on deforestation, it actually worsens climate change impacts because of release of carbon dioxide. When we have climate change boundaries being hit, it actually worsens the boundaries that we are hitting on ocean acidification, which is critical for the continuation of tourism and fisheries. And on the other side, when we have climate change happening, then storms, cyclones enable the salt water in the oceans. The ingress of salinity takes place and destroys and ruins agricultural areas, and of course, ruins also artisanal fisheries. So these are connected. Poverty and loss of livelihoods is actually connected to the environmental losses that are threatened by planetary boundaries. So we are running in a business world, well, if we are, for instance, in agriculture or in logistics or in tourism, where there are significant risks. And in fact, all of these risks are connected to each other. There is a need to transition us out of this neoclassical economy, which has unlimited externalities. And please remember, all of the impacts that I'm describing you, environmental and social, well, 2/3 of the economy is private sector. And it is actually the private sector which is in the driving seat. And therefore, it is we who are having these impacts on society and the environment. We need to transition ourselves from this neoclassical take, make, waste economy that we are in, which has got no limits on externalities, towards one which is an impact economy, which recognizes not just profits, which is an impact on, but also impacts on human capital, impacts on natural capital, impacts on social capital. In other words, going away from single capital to multi-capital, going away from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. The means of measuring performance also changes. We can't measure corporate performance anymore on just profits. It has to be impacts, which include, of course, profits. And we can't measure national performance based on GDP. It's got to be inclusive wealth, which, of course, will include the change in GDP due to all kinds of factors. And finally, nature, which is at the base of our economies and societies, is today being degraded and destroyed, as you can see through the planetary boundaries diagram. But we can regenerate nature, and this is where WWF and you come in. Unfortunately, the toolkit that you have to measure performance and how well you are navigating these risks is not particularly good. Most people use one of the 600 odd ESG rating methodologies that are available today. And as you can see, I've just taken two leading ESG rating methodologies. I would prefer not to name them because I have friends working in both of them, but this is a truth that applies to any two that you compare. There is just no comparability. X-axis and Y-axis are two leading ESG rating providers around the world. And they are rating here the top 100 companies in S&P 500. So these are the leading corporations in the world. And they are rated completely differently. No surprises that you have DWS, the CEO having to go as a result of a BaFin investigation, or we have Elon Musk jumping up and down about how Tesla is rated, and so on and so forth. So there is a problem here in terms of the toolkit that it leads to is incorrect statements. Because, for example, my company just researched 56 mining companies and found that only 3 of the 56 were actually reporting their tailing dam wastes correctly. Why? Because we don't look at any ESG ratings. We research the actual impacts. We log in, we research what they have published in their ESG reports, in their sustainability reports, in their GRI reports, and finally, of course, in their balance sheet and profit and loss. And we work out how they are reporting things like tailing dam waste. Only 3 of them were correctly segregating toxic and non-toxic components. The net result, company A, you would look at it and say, oh yeah, greenhouse gas emissions are the problem, or a mining company. Well, actually, no, because it's company B who is reporting correctly, showing clearly that it's the waste generation that is the biggest impact. These are, when I say big, $7.6 billion of social costs in terms of human health and the quality of water and the environment as a result of tailing dam waste, just one environmental impact. So these are some of the big issues and problems that simply get lost when you look at ESG. ESG cannot determine things in the way that the sharp lens of impacts can determine them. And frankly, all of these issues that I've described, the environmental, the social, the planetary boundaries issues, and the impacts that are not disclosed are affecting the Philippines. You are literally in the eye of the storm. As climate changes, the coastal impacts of climate change will be severe. Some of the challenges of having the Coral Triangle, Philippines, as you can see at the apex of that triangle, are huge, and you have experienced them. And then, as a result of all of these changes, you risk climate-driven economic losses in fisheries, in farming, in construction, due to the serious effects of soil subsidence and landslides and storms and cyclones, impacts on the real estate market, and obviously escalations in insurance. All of these are very destabilizing factors in the economy. And of course, not to mention the internal migration that may happen as a result of literally the entire coastal population, which is upwards of 25 million people, having to move inwards. How will this be managed? Clearly, we don't want what we have. What we want is a nature-positive world. And that nature-positive world is something that has been asked for by a whole host of organizations. Last year, there was an agreement signed, which is a global goal for nature, making ourselves nature-positive by 2030. We clearly are not. And the whole idea is to, as WWF says, to bend the curve of nature loss to ensure that we can actually reach that goal. That trajectory will require a lot of effort from a lot of people. And this is a short picture of what needs to be done, because as I mentioned, 2/3 of the economy is private sector. It is the economy's impacts that are driving us into nature negative. We need to change the way that corporations work, the way that investors work, and the way that policymakers decide policies. Corporates need to follow the science-based targets. They need to disclose to the investors, firstly, their material impacts through the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, through the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, through the SFDR requirement, the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulations of the European Union, and so on. And all of these can be pulled together by something that is known as the 4 Capitals Impacts approach, which is being spearheaded by Ronnie Cohen and the Value Balancing Alliance and the International Foundation for Valuing Impacts. And all of these issues can be made to converge so long as the policymakers internationally, who are meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh and meeting in Montreal in a short while, I'll be there to speak with them, So long as all of these big decision makers work in the same direction, they need to collaborate fearlessly, as the saying goes, towards network convergence. We need to ensure that the World Economic Forum, the UN General Assembly, all of these initiatives that have been launched recently, the Social and Human Capital Coalition merging with the Natural Capital, the International Foundation for Value Impacts with the leadership of Ronnie Cohen, and so on. All of these have to work in the same direction. The latest being the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board. If they come out with a guidance for disclosure, which is based and supported by the International Reporting Foundations, as well as by the IASB, the International Accounting Standards Board, if they don't move in the same direction, then there could be, again, challenges. But thankfully, so far, the four capitals approach that I'm describing to you is moving in the right direction. The Capitals Coalition, the United Nations itself, through their Inclusive Wealth Report, which was published first as far back as 2012, these are all using the four capitals approach. The Value Balancing Alliance, which includes amongst its leading and starting membership, the big four accountancy firms, they also are going in the same direction. So the idea of measuring impacts and reporting them eventually, in terms of not just financial and produced capital, but also in terms of natural, human, and social capital, this is an idea whose time has come. And I really welcome all of you to participate in that. In my conversations with various boards around the world, I'm seeing a few trends emerging. So firstly, people are beginning to ask me, and my company prepares impact metrics. We cover more than 12,500 companies. So we are getting requests from boards asking for, can you give us not just our impact based on all these disclosures that you are crawling from the web, but also for the following 8 competitors, or the following 12 competitors. So I'm asked to provide this intelligence, what I call impact intelligence. There are conversations going on strategic direction. Which areas should we select? Which areas should we deselect, emphasize, de-emphasize? How do we allocate capital to investment decisions? There's one company that I'm working with where they're actually splitting the company into two, what they effectively you may call the old company and the new company, because the product sets of each are so different. One is somewhat ancient and impactful, and the others are relatively less impactful. And finally, and not the least, all of these boards are talking about how do we set targets for our C-suite so that it includes sustainability and not just other kinds of performance, financial performance. So these, my friends, are what is going on right now. And I think the time has come for your boards and your C-suite also to think about what you want to do. And step one is the most important, is why should you do this? Sustainability has a powerful revenue multiplier in terms of looking at new areas and creating innovation in your company. Sustainability has another powerful cost multiplier in terms of moving you in the direction of saving of energy and saving of materials, and also reducing, in the third big thing it does, risks. So it can reduce the risk of you being in the eye of the storm for taxes and environmental taxes and so on. And last but not the least, sustainability will get you the young people and the talent that will be loyal to you and the customers that will be loyal to you. These are powerful forces, which are good reasons for the why. But your company and every company has its own slightly different reason for the why. But once you've decided that, the immediate next question is what? How are we going to achieve sustainability? What should we focus? Like the mining companies that got it wrong, should we focus on GHGs when actually we should be focusing on waste and its management and tailing dams? So the what, the framework, what should we value and why? And then finally get onto the methodologies, as in how should we value? And this is where people like me can help you. And then the time comes for you to ratify all this through an independent agent. WWF is here. They have expertise in all of the areas, be they impact drivers or impact outcomes like climate change and food systems, or be they the actual impacts on nature, whether it's in forests or water systems or oceans or biodiversity. Ask for your WWF colleagues here for help. Pilot your approach and then scale it. Scale it to your whole company and scale it to other companies in your group. I'm hearing, which is good news, that there's a creation coming of a Philippine Alliance for Climate Action. Very good. I'm very pleased to hear that, because I'd like to quote you an old Maasai saying, which is that if you want to travel fast, you travel alone. But if you want to travel far, walk together. So I encourage you guys all to walk together. And through that, please participate in the Great Transition. Thank you.